This is Father Patrick Briscoe.
And this is Father Gregory Pine.
Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all who support us. If you enjoy our show, be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Father Gregory, I don't know about you, but I was not much of an anime kid.
Nor was I.
Did you ever watch Nothing?
Ooh, you know what? Let's take that back. There was a period during which we had cable. And on cable, there's a
The Pine
channel
family
called,
had cable?
We had cable for a time, a brief time. Well, it was Dish Network.
I'm very disappointed
So
in
here's
your
the thing. I think
father.
it was like Dish Network was actually less expensive than not having anything. So we had like the $9.99
They would
Dish Network.
tax you for not having something.
Oh, yeah. They gave you tax breaks, in fact. And they did your taxes for you. Everything imaginable with taxes. But I think we had Cartoon Network for a time. And I think I watched a show called Zoids.
Zoids, very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So if it starts with a Z, you know it's fresh. Because or if it ends with a Z, Dragon Ball Z. That's a surefire giveaway for anime-based programming. But I think it was just Zoids. It was kind of like Transformers, but not.
Were you a Pokemon kid?
I was not especially Poke friendly. I was kind of in that weird
not
in between because I did the things that I did, and then I did the things that my little brother did. So there's 8 years between us, but there's a gap of like programming for which I was not on board. So like when all those, the things that happened in when we were in grade school, for instance, like I was very into Pogs.
I had loads of those.
Yeah, so very into Pogs. But then like by the time, I missed a few. So Tamagotchi, Crazy Bones, Pokemon, I missed all of those.
Okay.
And then I kind of picked back up again with my little brother for whatever it was. And then now I've picked back up with my nieces and nephews. So like I know everything there is to know about Frozen, that's for darn sure.
Yep.
And it is my unironic favorite movie of the last 7 seconds. But nevertheless.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Yeah, so I think Zoids, there might have been some points at which I watched some Dragon Ball Z. I probably saw some episodes of Pokemon. I probably played it on the Game Boy every once in a while, like going to and from the March for Life.
Nice.
Yeah, we were allowed to use Game Boy, I think, going to and from the March for Life.
Ooh, that's a little bribe from your mom. I love that. I think the closest we got in the Briscoe house was Powerpuff Girls.
Nice.
That's like kind of anime, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my little sisters, obviously.
Yeah, anime adjacent.
Into that show, yeah. But I think that this conversation is surfaced through the Jubilee in Catholic circles because of the announcement of Luce, the Catholic mascot. So that's what we want to talk about today. Before we get to Luce, though, I have an important announcement for all you starving liberal arts majors out there.
There it is.
That need something to do with your lives.
Exactly.
That would be me, but for the Dominican order.
Become a Dominican. Wait, different
Our
announcement?
friends, definitely become a Dominican.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
But for those that are not or cannot, the Catholic University of America has this amazing program, a Master of Science in Business, which is a 9-month program rooted in Catholic social teaching and virtue-centered education.
Let's
It is
go.
the only program I know of like this in the Catholic world. It's designed for students with liberal arts, STEM, or business backgrounds. So anybody
all
can step into
backgrounds.
this thing.
Are there other backgrounds?
I don't think so, but I'm particularly interested in this idea of making liberal arts people useful. I am a useless liberal arts person, so I really like this idea.
Yeah.
The accelerated in-person program gives each student a comprehensive mastery of business disciplines and equips them to pursue business as a force for good. Father Bonaventure would love that.
Nice.
I can see him fist pumping.
Well, he
right now.
loves it so much that you and he had Dina Bella
We
on the
did,
podcast.
which is a great episode. Everyone should
Exactly.
listen to that. So you could study with Dina Bella, for example. The Master of Science in Business program, located in Washington, D.C., has a long history of success with a 99% record of job placements.
Get out.
Within 5 months of graduation.
Do we employ any of those
Isn't that
people?
amazing? Not yet, but we should.
Okay, here we go.
To learn more about this program, go to msb.catholic.edu. Again, that's the Master of Science in Business program at the Catholic University of America. And for more information, head over to msb.catholic.edu.
Okay.
Back to
Luce.
Luce.
What do you think
the
Luce
Catholic
would think
mascot?
of the
Okay,
MSB?
first of all, true or false, we have never had a Catholic mascot before.
It depends what you mean by mascot. True.
True, you say. I think that's probably right. I don't think we've had like a mascot.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone said like, "Hey, you Catholics, you now have a mascot." I think Catholics have risen up organically and said, "We take this for our mascot."
Right. We definitely have symbols, right? We have things like the Jerusalem cross. That would be like a symbol. That's not like a mascot, though. You don't like take the Jerusalem cross out and be like, here's my mascot.
No, typically not. No, I don't think we
but that's
refer to
like
that as a
something that
mascot.
identifies you. Okay, so Father Greg, from your perspective, where you sit, which is under rock most of the time.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
you. That's
Hidden
just-
in my
that's just how it
office.
is, though.
Trying to determine whether to turn the
You
heat
get
on
the news
or not.
from people like me at the dinner table.
The intercessions, honestly, yeah. You mean to tell me we're praying for that?
Wait a minute. There's a war in Ukraine. Tell us a little bit about how you received the news of Luce and what you made of this first announcement.
Yeah, so I received the news of Luce when Luce appeared on the Godsplaining Instagram page.
Yes! That is a win. Okay, I spend too much time on Twitter. Go on.
Okay, so it might have been like, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks after the fact. But then I came to discover that it was a thing that people cared about and talked about. And I was fascinated because I'm like one of those weird creatures who is fueled not so much by food and drink as he is by the will of the Father for the one. And for the other, like ironic discourse. Because like I'm interested how great of a space has grown up between people and their lives. And then like what's going on in that space. That to me is fascinating. So yeah, that's where I live and move and have my being.
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit. So for listeners who don't know, Luce is this is a great sentence. I can't believe I'm saying Luce is the Catholic Church's anime mascot of the holy year 2025. Which is just a sentence that I can barely get through. I love it. I really do. I unironically love it. I think it's awesome. So Archbishop Fisichella, who is the head of the Dicastery for Evangelization, he's the organizer for the Jubilee year, announced Luce at a press conference.
Yes.
And so you had the introduction of Luce was just a kind of wild thing because you had a sort of stoic-looking Vatican press office photo, so everything's gray.
Yeah.
and there's this archbishop who occupies a very important, very influential position in the Vatican, and he's just sitting this kind of hand over this anime toy. Yeah. And I saw the photo and I thought, what in the world is this? And originally I was just so confused by it because I thought the first photo was fake.
Yeah. To
your point,
deep
and
fake.
we've got to get into this because I think there's something really interesting there. But I saw the first announcement and I did not think this thing was real.
Yeah,
I said, "Oh, cool! Somebody photoshopped, Vatican, a little toy into a Vatican presser. Like that's a really funny idea, ha ha." And then I click and I find out, whoa, the toy is real. The toy is controversial. Some people misunderstood Luce's name. Luce just is the Italian word for light.
Yeah.
Okay, but some people saw Luce and they thought Lucifer.
Different things.
Which is correct insofar as the etymology is related.
Light bearer.
But that is not, in fact, the toy. The toy is not named after Satan. The toy is named after light, right? Because light is connected to hope, which is the theme for the Jubilee. All right, everybody get on board. This is the Jubilee. We're doing hope. Therefore, we're not doing Satan. We're doing light. That seems pretty clear to me. The other thing that people saw that was sort of controversial when they first saw the image, right? They saw the rosary beads around Luce's neck. They didn't like that Luce was wearing the rosary. That is something that differs throughout the Catholic life. So I've always taught never to wear a rosary.
As was I.
But some places do.
Some places do.
So you just have that. But then people looked at the rosary and they saw the multicolored rosary and they thought the rosary is gay coded. And they did not like that because it seemed like a kind of pride occupation of the rosary. However, that couldn't be further from the truth because the rosary is in fact the World Mission Rosary, which was designed by the Venerable Fulton J. Sheen.
Nice.
So that's not what's going on there.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a little, it's important that we learn to read our Catholic signs and symbols so we know what they mean. And we don't get angry about things that aren't true.
Just let's get angry about the things that are true.
But there are some things that are true, like the fact that there was a little bit of controversy about the artist.
Right. Who has done things for the LGBTQ plus community and things for kind of dubious causes of a morally unsavory nature in the past. But then the question is whether you just cancel all artists who do bad things. And it seems like we're already in a spot kind of in cancel culture, like the waning years of cancel culture, where we don't do that anymore. So obviously the church has been a patron of the arts for many years, and some of the people whom the church has patronized have done bad things. And so there's a kind of distance between artist and art and a kind of distance between patronage and embrace, which I think is part of the ongoing conversation of a Catholic's relationship to these matters. So I think there's also sufficient space there. But nevertheless, these are things that people are saying.
And it is a point of principle, right? Because if the church is going to apply, and you're speaking to someone who has argued to pull out certain mosaicist works.
Yep.
There is a real point of discourse, though, that would require the church to have dialogue with the world. And again, I've mentioned this before. I love when the church engages with celebrities. I think it's very interesting, and I don't think we should have to apply a morals exam in order to have that interaction and dialogue. And I think one could legitimately propose that point in this conversation. What kind of artists are we going to hire, and what does that mean for Catholic art and creations like Jubilee mascots?
Yeah, and I think too, Hallow has made this conversation conversationable in recent years. Certainly, like, Hallow is very invested in getting the word out that prayer is cool and that prayer is life-changing.
Yeah.
And they're going to deploy any number of resources to that end, one of which is to hire famous people, even if those famous people may or may not have done things of a dubious nature. So it's like, cohabitation, speaking against certain Catholic positions, or even some of the more grave, like the question of Liam Neeson and abortion was the hottest topic. But now you've got folks like Gwen Stefani, who are voices of Hallow, and it seems like their strategy is effective insofar as it gets this app in front of people who might not otherwise be prompted to pray in disciplined or consistent fashion. And it's like 23 million downloads of that app by this point, by the way, which is like a big
Incredible.
number.
Yeah, that's right. And which exploded after their Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah.
So not just having it, not only did they have a Super Bowl commercial, which is amazing, but then the result of the Super Bowl commercial pushed people to this platform, which is really incredible. Praise God for that. Last two thoughts about Luce before we get into what I think is the real bullet points of this conversation. Luce appears to be a pilgrim.
Yep.
Which is great.
Yeah.
She kind of like in that way she represents what the Jubilee is, right? You're supposed to go on pilgrimage. If you can't make it to Rome, go to your diocesan cathedral, this kind of thing. There are many ways to participate in the Jubilee through pilgrimage, but especially by going on pilgrimage to Rome. Luce has she's got like the raincoat, she's got the muddy boots, she's got blue hair, she's got a pilgrim walking stick, which some people have called a witch's staff.
Fascinating.
It's like the discourse on
Everything
this is
that can be
really
said.
wild. Everything that can be said is definitely said. She has scallop shells in her eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
The eyes, which are a symbol of the Camino, right? The pilgrimage, which you love so dearly.
I do indeed.
I think it's very interesting how Luce is actually representative of our tradition in important ways.
Yeah.
Like all the symbols that I mentioned. Okay. But Luce has not been received warmly by everyone. So what are some critics objecting to?
Yeah, I think
apart from the concerns about the artist.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the most serious criticisms have been along this line, namely Luce is unserious. So it's like, okay, here we are. We have been baptized, confirmed, in some cases ordained. So we have been marked with Christian consecration, which has permanently configured us to participate in the priesthood of our Lord Jesus Christ. And that's like serious business. And so the idea that we would, in an effort to make the church somehow relevant or somehow more pertinent to a younger audience, distance ourselves from more sober or otherwise grave signs of our affiliation, take up this thing which is, by comparison to what we have done in the past, so kind of like light and funky, seems like a kind of betrayal. So I think you've had like a lot of criticism in the last 55 years, especially about the damning effects of trying to make the church relevant.
Right.
Because in that effort, there's a kind of tacit infidelity where you don't actually believe that God is God and that he does God things. You're like, oh, well, we have to bring these people along because God won't, because he's left the world to us, his servants, and it's our responsibility to exercise stewardship of a certain sort. So what we're going to do is just look at the ambient culture and then deploy everything within that culture that people find attractive as an effort to get them on our side. But it ends up being like kind of socio-political rather than genuinely ecclesial, because it's born of a kind of infidelity, or it's born of a tacit despair that God is at work in the world and that he can have his way. Whereas when you just point awesomely and adamantly to God, to his Christ, to the cross through which he saves, people will always find that relevant because it corresponds deeply to our nature. So there's a kind of fear, not fear, but there's a kind of concern there that we're actually failing to receive the patrimony and betraying the riches with which we have been entrusted.
Now that strikes that hits home with me because, you know, in our coming of age, Bishop Barron had just released his Catholicism series on DVD set. You know, so for listeners that are younger than millennials, DVDs were actual things that you put into something else.
They were like laser
played
discs,
a movie,
except smaller.
Yeah, so think a big record and then make that little, and then you could watch a movie off of that without the internet. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So Bishop Barron made a DVD set of Catholicism where he went to a bunch of places and told us the meaning of those places. And it was extraordinary because no one had done anything like that series. So that was how Bishop Barron became America's bishop. You know, how he entered the media space because he had done something so beautiful, so compelling that nobody else had done, right? And he revealed the treasures of the church in a compelling way, visually. I mean, it's just a magnificent DVD series to watch. But also, I suppose you could stream it now. But also, the series included an instruction that most of us had not been given about our faith, right? There's a richness of the tradition. And so Bishop Barron's whole point was that Catholicism had been made bland, that had been made unintelligible, that had been dumbed down, and that it had been whitewashed. And in order to have a serious faith, we needed a faith that was visually robust, beautiful, and intellectually strong. And I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
15, 20 years later, I think we can say he has succeeded.
Yeah, he is correct about all of those things. and that series and the project of Word on Fire has just made a tremendous impact in the church. And I think all of that's objective. That's not like a partisan thing to say. You know, thank God for it.
Yeah, come at me.
So I agree with those that would be concerned about this. But what do you have to say, Father Gregory, to the point that not everything has to be grave or solemn, even when it comes to something like religion? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think about it along these lines. The human heart gives rise to a variety of desires. What's important isn't that you get rid of the lower desires and then just leave the higher desires. What's important is
thank God, because I've got this cup of coffee here.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really desire it. I really need it right now.
Yeah, I think the point is that those desires be ordered in the sense that the desire for transcendence, the desire for worship, the desire for union, for communion with the Most High God takes pride of place, not just because we will it so, but because it has an objective importance in our lives which needs to be enshrined in our subjective inner sanctum. You know, so it's like, what's the case out there? How does it take up residence in here? And then how do we interact with reality in a way that's fruitful and faithful, whatever, you know, like that's actually well adjusted or appropriate on the basis of what is. And so I think it's like when we do things of a lower sort which displace things of a higher sort, that's when we're in trouble. Classic example being like, you know, somebody who likes to drink a lot of alcohol and sleep a lot of hours and not go to mass has that hierarchy all wonky on account of the fact that the lower is displacing the higher. So like drinking to excess is sinful. Sleeping in is not sinful, but insofar as it prevents us from observing our duties, you know, like our responsibilities as worshiping sons and daughters of the Most High God, we're in a problematic spot. So I think that I think it's good for certain things of a light and funky sort to occupy our human spaces and our human culture. Like not everything has to be grave, serious. Certainly we have a virtue, which we refer to as eutrapelia or play, which kind of breathes into us a recognition of this fact that everything can't be serious, everything can't be grave, that every once in a while we have to unstring the bow, or the bow itself begins to crack, it begins to lose its spring. And that we need both like mental and physical refreshment as a way by which to live our human lives in this body on the way with the hope of attaining to the end. So I think it's like, that's a kind of, there are serious things in life, and we ought not be, trifling or frivolous about them, but there are also somewhat unserious things in life. And I think that's like humor has a way of revealing that to us in an especial way, to kind of like reveal to us our silliness as creatures, so that we can get a little space, and so that we can take a look from a little vantage and say, wow, what a silly beast. How funky, how light and fresh.
I'm thinking of that great story in our tradition of the novices that were walking along with Jordan of Saxony, and they were praying night prayer, they were praying Compline as they walked along. And someone, the details escape me, right? But someone at some point, missays a word or trips or whatever, and they all burst out laughing. And one of the older friars begins to scold the novices, and it's Jordan of Saxony, right, who stops the scolding, interrupts the friar scolding the novices, and says, "Let them laugh. Satan has been defeated." And there's something to that, right? There's the great tradition of the Easter laugh, of a kind of rejoicing in the face of evil, and then you've got, in addition to that kind of strain, you've got the really what's the right word? The really grotesque stories of the martyrs, that are making jokes as they're dying.
Yeah, sure.
That have been handed down in our Catholic tradition. Excuse me. Like Lawrence saying, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side," or any of these other sorts of tales, right? So it does seem like there's a place for that. Now, but part of this conversation is about the distance between what's real and what's not. Like when I first saw Luce, as I said, I didn't think it was real.
Yeah.
I thought the release photo, which most of us saw on the Catholic TV Twitter account, which is kind of a hilarious thing too. I thought the release photo was some kind of weird deep fake.
Yeah.
So there's a growing, it seems like Luce is kind of a problem, or at least inviting a conversation, if we don't want to be negative about it, about the distance rather between what is real and what is not.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. Like, you can evaluate the merits of Luce on various paradigms or rubrics. Like, is it good art? I don't know anything about anime art, but it seems like people who do think that it's pretty good. Like, and a lot of people just kind of in a prima facie, like engagement with it, like, yeah, she's like kind of silly, like she's kind of cute. It's like, fine, okay. But then this question here of deep fakeitude is another one. It's like, is Luce conducting us to the term of our human existence, which is always going to be in the setting of a sacramental encounter? Like, we more and more we live on the internet, but as a result of which we're less and less sure as to what's real. And, like, we can see this precipitated by advance in, artificial intelligence and the technologies associated therewith. But, like, we're not actually sure what's up. And people talk about massive distrust in the media. Like, American trust in the media has gone down in the past 8 years from like 62% to like 39%. That's pretty precipitous as far as declines go. So, like, we don't trust the media. We don't trust our politicians. We don't trust our institutions. We don't really trust our culture. We don't really trust anything at this point. And so, like, the way that Gen Z, for instance, consumes news items is they'll, like, look at a headline. They'll just skip the article. They'll go down to the com box, and they'll see how, like,
that
the
is
chat...
astonishing to me, how people are reacting to it.
Yeah, but they'll just, like, see
That
how
is
the chat
astonishing.
has borne out, truth claims. So they'll see, like, kind of how people have squatted up. They'll recognize their voice and their kind of inclinations or predispositions in the voices of one half of the debate, and then they'll find their home there. So for us, it's like there's an increased tribalism when you don't actually know, or when you don't actually have like certainty and confidence that you can gain access to reasonable discourse. You're going to retreat to tribalism, And so, like, in this digital space, there's just there's a lot that goes by way of just strong contrariety or allergic reaction or like fear or hate or whatever else that's not actually principled discourse. And I think that we lose sight of the questions that matter. Like, is Luce going to convert anyone? Probably not, but, like, is Luce kind of like charming and whimsical and hilarious? Yes.
Absolutely.
Where does that fit in human life? In a very, very very much lower place, subordinate place, blah, blah, blah. But, like, I think those are interesting questions to ask, but to get to them is hard.
Right. So I realized Luce was good because the memes were dank. So, I was sort of, I again, like, we're like reeling, trying to figure out what is going on here with this thing. And what do I know? I'm a millennial. I don't know anything about Gen Z except what they tell me. So I, following this conversation, and I realized, oh, heck yeah. I stand Luce because the memes are great. So you have like Luce rescuing babies from an abortion facility. It's so awesome. Or like Luce standing over, a bloodied Satan with a spear, through his heart. It's like, absolutely, yes. So there's a way in which people can kind of claim things, and in our discourse, people sort of rise up and want something. I mean, it's something like expressions for traditional forms of Catholic worship, for example, that people want. It's just a kind of groundswell that a culture is looking for. I think we saw that in Luce. That's part of what was interesting too for me about Luce, was that Luce stretched across different sections of the church. Yeah. So you're talking about the threat of tribalism and how if we don't allow genuine discourse, that's what we fall into. Luce was powerful because Luce provoked a bunch of different responses from a bunch of different sectors. Yep. And you found people agreeing. So there were trad sectors that stood Luce, and others that didn't. But the overlap was interesting because it wasn't the traditional, or typical rather, spheres of discourse in the church. Luce sort of broke that. So I thought that was good. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. So I think that, like, as we are increasingly just like in a digital space and live a digital life, it's hard to host like fruitful conversation. And I'm not just like dialogue for dialogue's sake. Like, no one gives a rip. I don't think any of us are here just to talk about talking, because death comes unto those who engage in such conversations. But it's like, I think that people do want to be put in contact with principles and arguments that actually mediate contact with reality. And so on account of the fact that like whatever comes out on the internet provokes a response, and then people squad up or tribe up or whatever else up, it can feel hard to gain access to principles and to gain access to arguments which actually mediate said contact with reality. I think that when you have a sweet provocation, or when you have something that feels a little bit different or a little bit on, off, whatever, I think that brings people to a point where like, now I want to have a conversation. I think like these conversations are the cool things that Luce has brought about. Insofar as it's like what are we doing on the internet as Catholics? And I think that conversation, especially as it's developed in the last couple of years, is fun. It's light and it's funky, because I just think, especially as people are less afraid of addressing controversial topics and coming to a recognition that the point isn't just to like show your credentials and say angry things, but actually to facilitate real contact that can help furnish people with resources. Like, we did this episode about divorced and remarried, and it didn't have an edge. It was just like, these are the principles, these are the arguments.
That thing
this is how people
up. I was so grateful for that.
And it was just and then like the women who work for us were like, what do you want to do with comments? And it was just like, just put our email addresses in the chat, because the point of this is to actually like resolve strange marital situations and to furnish people with the resources that they need in order to be reconciled to God and His church. So it's like the internet. I mean, it's the internet. It's like there are no rules. Like it's a bot run by advertising agencies that we're just trying to navigate. And it's totally nuts. It's totally insane. But like Luce has made certain conversations kind of pop up in a weird way, which I'm like happy to partake in.
Same. I hope with my pilgrim heart that I receive all the graces of the Jubilee, that my eyes are turned to pilgrim shells, and, I carry my staff, not a witch's stick. I carry my staff, and I have my mission rosary, and my hope is restored. No, so obviously I'm a Luce fan. I've been converted. I think Luce is great for all the reasons that we mentioned. I think the people want Luce in a Godsplaining hoodie. I think they do. We'll see. We'll keep trying. Whether or not we get the little figure, we could do like the Archbishop Fisichella press conference photo with Luce.
Let's just look real old and real confused. I still, but here's the thing, like I still don't know what Luce does. Like I don't know who she is, what she does, what she stands for, because like
she's Catholic.
Well, she is.
She
maybe
saves the babies.
It's hard to say, but like
she fights Satan.
But like with Gen Z and Gen Alpha memes, no, like I don't know what they say. I don't know what they mean. Like I don't know what half of the memes that I see mean. I don't know what they mean.
Yep.
It's just where we find ourselves at present.
Yeah. No, I think that really is the best conclusion, though. The internet's a rodeo, and it's kind of wild, and we're grateful to everyone who allows us to participate in said rodeo. I think that's a great place to leave it. Having laid out some of these principles. So, live, laugh,
Luce.
Luce.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I think that's it. Well, friends, thanks for tuning into this episode of Godsplaining. We have a quick announcement before we part ways. Coming up here in Dallas on March 21st to 23rd, we've got a young adult retreat, which is going to be lit. It's going to be great. So
that's the first time I've heard you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love these retreats. I really do.
Yeah,
I'm genuinely excited for them. And by the time that rolls around, I'll be really excited for it. So we've got that retreat in Dallas. Again, a special word of thanks to all of those of you who support us. If you'd like to support the podcast, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You make it possible for us to fight off the evil robots that try and hide our content from people.
Nice.
But thanks to you, we can advertise and get the word out and do stuff like that. We can have retreat programs and we can save souls, which is what the podcast is all about. If you are so inclined, shop Godsplaining merch. You can find cool things like socks now in our store, which is super fun. Those have been out for a bit, so get some Godsplaining socks. Follow us on social media platforms if you like. Comment on the episodes. Father Gregory was talking about this. We love that. Tell us what you think about Luce in the chat. And in the meantime, friends, we ask that you would pray for us and know that we're praying for you. God bless.
Father Bonaventure, if you had to choose between getting Warby Parker glasses, subscribing to a YouTube channel, or flossing your teeth, what would you choose?
Oof. I guess, to be honest, subscribing to a YouTube channel.
See, folks, it's not as bad as flossing your teeth or getting Warby Parker glasses. Please subscribe to Godsplaining. Cheers.